They say that sometimes the most innocent discoveries can unravel the most elaborate deceptions. But I never expected that my wife's forgotten laptop would reveal a betrayal so systematic that it would change everything I thought I knew about our marriage. My name is Stephen, and this is the story of how discovering my wife's affair through her digital footprint led me to orchestrate a revenge so calculated that it exposed not just her infidelity, but the entire network of lies she had built around our life together. My wife Rachel and I had been married for 7 years when she started a new job at a marketing agency downtown. She was excited about the opportunity to work with a creative team and to develop campaigns for major clients. Rachel had always been ambitious and talented, and I was proud to see her advancing in her career. The new job required Rachel to work longer hours and to travel occasionally for client meetings and industry conferences. She would often bring work home in the evenings, using her company laptop to finish presentations and respond to emails. I was supportive of her dedication and understood that building a successful career sometimes required sacrifices in terms of time and personal life. Rachel seemed energized by her new role and would often share stories about interesting projects she was working on and colleagues she was collaborating with. She spoke particularly often about her creative director, a man named Marcus who had apparently taken her under his wing and was helping her develop her skills in strategic campaign development. I was happy that Rachel had found a mentor who was invested in her professional growth, and I encouraged her to take advantage of the learning opportunities that Marcus was providing. Rachel seemed grateful for his guidance and would often mention insights he had shared or techniques he had taught her. About 6 months into Rachel's new job, she began working even longer hours and traveling more frequently. She would often stay late at the office for brainstorming sessions or client presentations, and she started attending more industry events and networking functions. Rachel explained that these activities were essential for building relationships and advancing her career. I noticed that Rachel had become more protective of her work devices and more secretive about her professional activities. She would close her laptop when I entered the room and would take phone calls in private when they were work-related. When I asked about her projects or her colleagues, her answers became more vague and general. Rachel also began paying more attention to her appearance and wardrobe. She started buying more expensive clothes, getting her hair styled more frequently, and wearing makeup to work every day. When I complimented these changes, she explained that her new role required her to present a more polished and professional image to clients and colleagues. One evening in November, Rachel left her company laptop open on our kitchen table while she went upstairs to take a shower. She had been working on a presentation and had apparently forgotten to close the computer when she decided to take a break. I wasn't intentionally trying to snoop, but I noticed that she had multiple browser tabs open and several messaging applications running. What caught my attention was a chat window that was still active, showing a conversation between Rachel and someone named Marcus. The messages that were visible on the screen were not professional in nature. They were intimate and romantic, with references to missing each other and planning to meet later that evening. I was shocked and confused by what I was seeing. The Marcus that Rachel had described as her professional mentor was apparently much more than a colleague. The messages suggested that they had been involved in a romantic relationship and that they had been meeting regularly outside of work. I quickly took photos of the chat conversation with my phone before Rachel returned from her shower. I wanted to have evidence of what I had seen, but I also needed time to process what I had discovered and decide how to handle the situation. When Rachel came back downstairs, she immediately closed her laptop and put it away. She seemed slightly flustered and asked if I had been using her computer while she was upstairs. I told her that I hadn't touched it, which was technically true since I had only looked at the screen without interacting with the device. Over the next few days, I began paying closer attention to Rachel's behavior and schedule. I noticed patterns that I had previously attributed to work demands but that now seemed suspicious in light of what I had discovered. Rachel's late nights at the office often coincided with evenings when she would come home seeming particularly happy and energized. I also started researching Marcus online to learn more about who he was and what his relationship to Rachel might be. Through social media and professional networking sites, I discovered that Marcus was indeed Rachel's creative director, but he was also a divorced man in his early 40s who had a reputation for being charming and successful with women. I realized that I needed to gather more evidence of Rachel's affair before confronting her about what I had discovered. The chat conversation I had photographed was compelling, but I wanted to understand the full scope of her deception and the extent of her relationship with Marcus. I began monitoring Rachel's digital activities more carefully, looking for opportunities to gather additional evidence of her infidelity. I noticed that she had been using her personal phone more frequently for texting, and that she had been more protective of her device than she had been in the past. One weekend, when Rachel was visiting her sister, I decided to examine her laptop more thoroughly to see what other evidence I might find. Rachel had left the computer at home, claiming that she wanted to take a break from work during her family visit. What I discovered when I accessed Rachel's laptop was far more extensive than I had expected. Her browser history showed regular visits to dating websites and social media platforms, where she had been communicating with multiple men, not just Marcus. Her email accounts contained correspondence with several different people, suggesting that her infidelity was not limited to a single affair. Most disturbing of all, I found evidence that Rachel had been maintaining profiles on dating applications and had been actively seeking new romantic connections even while she was involved with Marcus. She had been presenting herself as single and available, with no mention of being married or in a committed relationship. I also discovered that Rachel had been using our joint credit cards to pay for hotel rooms, expensive dinners, and gifts that were apparently intended for her various romantic partners. She had been funding her affairs with money from our shared accounts, essentially forcing me to pay for her betrayal of our marriage. The digital evidence painted a picture of systematic deception that went far beyond what I had initially suspected. Rachel was not just having an affair with her colleague Marcus. She was maintaining multiple relationships and actively seeking new partners while presenting herself as a devoted wife to me. I realized that Rachel's increased attention to her appearance and her claims about needing to present a professional image were actually motivated by her desire to attract and maintain relationships with multiple men. Her longer work hours and frequent travel were providing cover for her various romantic activities. I also discovered that Rachel had been lying to me about many aspects of her job and her professional activities. Some of the conferences and client meetings she claimed to attend were actually personal trips with her romantic partners. Some of the late nights at the office were actually evenings spent with men she had met through dating applications. The most painful aspect of Rachel's deception was the realization that our entire marriage had been built on lies. She had been systematically betraying our relationship while maintaining the facade of being a loving and committed wife. Every conversation we had about her work, her colleagues, and her professional goals had been contaminated by her deception. I decided that Rachel needed to face consequences for her systematic infidelity and deception, but I also wanted to ensure that I had comprehensive evidence of her betrayal before confronting her. I wanted her to understand that her lies had been discovered and that she would face appropriate consequences for her choices. The plan I developed was designed to expose Rachel's affairs in a way that would be undeniable and devastating. I wanted her to realize that her digital activities had been documented and that her web of lies had been completely unraveled. Phase 1 involved gathering comprehensive evidence of Rachel's infidelity by documenting her digital communications, her dating profiles, her financial transactions, and her lies about her professional activities. I wanted to create a complete record of her deception. Phase 2 involved identifying all of the men that Rachel had been involved with and gathering information about their relationships with her. I wanted to understand the full scope of her infidelity and the extent of her deception. Phase 3 involved exposing Rachel's affairs to the people who mattered most in our lives, our families, close friends, and her professional colleagues who had been unknowingly supporting her deception by believing her lies about working late and traveling for business. Phase 4 was more personal and involved confronting Rachel with the evidence in a way that would force her to acknowledge the full extent of her betrayal and face the consequences of her systematic deception. The final phase involved the practical aspects of ending our marriage, including divorce proceedings, division of assets, and ensuring that Rachel understood the full impact of her choices on our relationship and our future. The confrontation happened on a Friday evening in December, exactly 1 month after I had first discovered the chat conversation on Rachel's laptop. She had just returned from what she claimed was a client dinner, and I had prepared a comprehensive presentation of all the evidence I had gathered about her affairs. Instead of engaging in our usual evening routine, I presented Rachel with printed copies of her chat conversations, screenshots of her dating profiles, records of her financial transactions, and documentation of her lies about her professional activities. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Rachel's reaction was initially one of shock and panic as she realized that her digital deception had been discovered and documented in detail. She tried to deny the evidence at first, claiming that I had misunderstood what I was seeing and that her online activities were not what they appeared to be. But the evidence was too comprehensive and specific for her denials to be credible. I had documentation of her romantic relationships with multiple men, proof of her lies about her work activities, and records of her use of our joint finances to fund her affairs. When Rachel realized that denial wasn't working, she changed tactics and tried to minimize the significance of what she had done. She claimed that her online relationships were primarily emotional and that she had been feeling lonely and disconnected in our marriage. She suggested that her affairs were a symptom of problems in our relationship rather than a betrayal of our marriage vows. But I was not interested in Rachel's attempts to justify or rationalize her systematic infidelity. The issue was not whether our marriage had problems, but whether she had chosen to address those problems through honest communication or through lies and deception. She had chosen deception on a massive scale, and she needed to face the consequences of that choice. That evening, I also revealed that I had contacted several of the men she had been involved with to inform them that she was married and had been lying to them about her relationship status. Most of them had been unaware that Rachel was married and were shocked to learn that they had been unknowingly participating in adultery. I told Rachel that I planned to share the evidence of her affairs with our families, our friends, and her employer, since she had been using work time and company resources to conduct her personal relationships. I wanted everyone who had been supporting her lies to understand the truth about her behavior. Rachel was devastated to learn that her affairs would be exposed to our social and professional networks. She begged me to keep the information private and suggested that we could work through our problems with counseling and therapy. But I had already made the decision that our marriage was over. Rachel's infidelity was not a single mistake or a moment of weakness. It was a systematic campaign of deception that had involved multiple relationships, extensive lies, and the use of our shared resources to fund her betrayal. The trust that was essential to our marriage had been completely destroyed. The legal and practical consequences for Rachel were swift and comprehensive. I filed for divorce immediately, citing her adultery as grounds for the dissolution of our marriage. The digital evidence I had gathered provided clear documentation of her infidelity, making it impossible for her to contest the divorce or claim that our marriage had ended for other reasons. Rachel was also forced to face the professional consequences of her affairs when I shared the evidence with her employer. The company took a dim view of employees who used work time and company resources to conduct personal relationships, especially when those relationships involved deception and fraud. Most importantly, Rachel was forced to confront the reality that her systematic deception had destroyed not just our marriage, but her relationships with the men she had been involved with. When they learned that she had been lying to them about her marital status, most of them ended their relationships with her immediately. The most satisfying aspect of Rachel's exposure was watching her realize that her own digital activities had been the instrument of her downfall. The laptop and devices that she had used to conduct her affairs had also provided the evidence that exposed her deception. Rachel had thought she was being clever by maintaining multiple relationships and using technology to coordinate her various affairs. But she had failed to consider that digital communications leave permanent records and that her online activities could be discovered and documented. The divorce proceedings were straightforward and decisive. Rachel's adultery was well documented through the digital evidence, and she had no grounds to contest the dissolution of our marriage or to claim a significant portion of our shared assets. The systematic nature of her deception also influenced the court's decisions about property division and support obligations. Rachel's relationships with the men she had been involved with did not survive the exposure of her deception. Most of them felt betrayed and used when they learned that she had been lying to them about her marital status and had been maintaining multiple relationships simultaneously. Most importantly, I was able to move forward with my life knowing that I had handled Rachel's betrayal with dignity and strategic thinking. I had not allowed my anger and hurt to drive me to impulsive or destructive actions. Instead, I had gathered evidence, documented the truth, and ensured that Rachel faced appropriate consequences for her choices. The digital evidence that had exposed Rachel's affairs also provided me with valuable insights about the importance of trust and verification in relationships. I learned that it's possible for people to maintain elaborate deceptions using technology, and that digital communications can sometimes reveal truths that would otherwise remain hidden. I also learned that systematic deception is often more damaging than impulsive betrayal because it demonstrates a willingness to manipulate and exploit trust over an extended period. Rachel's affairs were not moments of weakness or poor judgment. They were calculated campaigns of lies that had required ongoing planning and execution. The experience taught me to pay attention to changes in people's behavior and to trust my instincts when something doesn't seem right. Rachel's increased secrecy about her digital activities had been a warning sign that I should have investigated sooner. Looking back on this experience, I am proud of the way I handled the discovery of Rachel's affairs. I could have confronted her immediately when I first saw the chat conversation, but instead I took the time to gather comprehensive evidence and develop a strategic response. This approach ensured that Rachel could not deny or minimize her deception. The marriage that I had thought was built on trust and shared commitment had actually been undermined by systematic lies and betrayal. But the process of exposing Rachel's deception had also revealed my own strength and resilience, and it had prepared me to build healthier relationships in the future based on genuine honesty and transparency. Rachel's affairs had been a betrayal of our marriage vows and our shared commitment to honesty and fidelity. But her systematic deception had been an even deeper betrayal because it had demonstrated her willingness to manipulate my trust and exploit our shared resources to fund her selfish behavior. The revenge I orchestrated against Rachel was comprehensive and devastating, but it was also justified and necessary to expose the truth and ensure that she faced appropriate consequences for her choices. Rachel had chosen to build her affairs on a foundation of lies and deception, and she had to face the full consequences of that decision. The digital technology that had enabled Rachel's affairs had also provided the evidence that exposed her deception. The irony was not lost on me that the devices and applications she had used to coordinate her betrayal had also documented her crimes and provided the proof needed to hold her accountable. In the end, Rachel's systematic deception had achieved the opposite of what she had intended. Instead of allowing her to maintain both her marriage and her affairs, her lies had ultimately cost her all of her relationships and had damaged her reputation and professional standing as well. The most important outcome of this entire experience was that I was able to reclaim my life and my future from Rachel's web of lies and betrayal. I was no longer living in a relationship built on deception, and I was free to build a new life based on honesty, integrity, and genuine connection with people who shared my values. The digital evidence that had exposed Rachel's affairs served as a reminder that truth has a way of revealing itself, even when people use sophisticated technology to hide their deception. Rachel's careful planning and systematic lies had ultimately been no match for the permanent records created by her own digital activities. Rachel learned that deception and betrayal come with consequences that extend far beyond the immediate goals they are meant to achieve. She lost her marriage, her reputation, and the respect of family and friends who had trusted her. She discovered that the trust and love of the people closest to her, once broken through systematic betrayal, could not be easily repaired or replaced. The revenge was complete, the truth was exposed, and I was finally free to build a new life based on the values of honesty and integrity that Rachel had abandoned. I had won not just a legal victory in the divorce proceedings, but a moral victory that validated my commitment to truth and accountability in relationships. Looking forward, I carried with me the lessons I had learned about the importance of paying attention to changes in behavior, trusting my instincts when something seems wrong, and using available evidence to verify trust rather than simply assuming that people are being honest. The experience had been painful and difficult, but it had also been educational and ultimately liberating. I had learned that I was capable of handling systematic betrayal with strategic thinking and dignity, and I had proven to myself that I would not compromise my own values even when faced with the worst kind of personal deception. Rachel's story became a cautionary tale about the dangers of building relationships on lies and deception, and about the way that digital technology can expose betrayal that might otherwise remain hidden. Her downfall served as a reminder that systematic deception ultimately destroys not just the relationships it is meant to preserve, but the character and integrity of the person who chooses deception over honesty. The laptop that had accidentally revealed Rachel's first affair had ultimately exposed her entire network of deception. But it had also provided me with the evidence I needed to reclaim my life and build a future based on the values that truly mattered to me. In the end, the revenge was not just about exposing Rachel's affairs or ensuring that she faced consequences for her betrayal. It was about vindicating the principles of honesty and integrity that she had abandoned, and about proving that truth and accountability will ultimately prevail over lies and deception. The marriage that Rachel had destroyed through her systematic betrayal was replaced by a new understanding of what genuine partnership should look like, built on transparency, mutual respect, and shared commitment to honesty in all aspects of life. Her betrayal had been devastating, but it had also been educational, and I was determined to use those lessons to build better relationships in the future. Rachel's affairs and the elaborate digital deception she had constructed to cover them had ultimately cost her everything that should have mattered to her: her marriage, her integrity, and the trust of the people who had loved her. The laptop that exposed her betrayal served as a permanent reminder that truth has a way of revealing itself, no matter how carefully people try to hide it. The revenge was complete, justice was served, and I was finally free to move forward with my life, knowing that I had handled one of the most difficult challenges a person can face with dignity, strategic thinking, and unwavering commitment to the truth.